Okay, we are going to call to order the meeting of Florida Housing Finance Corporation Board of Directors, meeting of March 22nd, 2019. If you remember from the last time, we are going to ask Sheila to take the roll for the record. So, Sheila, if you would.
Good morning. Ray Dubuque.
Here.
Ron Lieberman. Mario Ficella.
Here.
Preston Leifried.
Present.
Ken Lawson.
Here.
Natasha Bastian.
Here.
Rainier Diaz de la Portilla.
Here.
Latasha Green Cobb.
Present.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of our February 1st meeting. They were previously provided. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. All right, now we're moving into the public comment associated with items on the agenda. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak to that? Okay, seeing none. Would like to, yeah, I'm about to do that.
Sorry.
You're thinking ahead of me again. I mean, that's at Eastern Time Zone versus Central. All right, first item on that we need to talk about is there's been a request to pull from the consent agenda legal item A. And if I see no objection to that, we will pull legal item A and discuss it at the end of the action items. From the consent agenda, it's pulled. Okay, and there were no public comments, so move into finance. Angie?
Good morning. Beginning in 1998, when Florida Housing became a corporation, we've sponsored an employee retirement plan. The plan has two parts, a 457 deferred compensation plan where employees can deposit a portion of their pre-tax income. Staff may participate in this plan after 90 days employment, and they are immediately vested since the plan is made up entirely of their funds. The other part of the retirement plan is a 401 account. Florida Housing contributes a portion of salary for each employee, plus we match 50% of their contributions to the 457 plan. Participants are 100% vested after 3 years employment with no incremental vesting milestones prior to that point. Right now, employees are not eligible to participate in the 401 plan until they've completed 1 year employment. Recently, our HR department polled other HFAs to find out what their waiting periods were. 15 states responded, and 9 of them had plans similar to ours. Of those, 8 have no waiting period at all, and 1 had a 6-month waiting period. Changing the service requirement from 1 year to 90 days to match the 457 plan will put us more in line with others in our industry and encourage participation in the 457 plan. Staff recommends that the board authorize the plan trustees to change the service requirement for Florida Housing's 401A plan from 12 months to 90 days, effective January 1st, 2019.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion on this item?
I just have one question.
Yes.
The 12 months initially that was set up, I mean, why was it decided 12 months? Do you know?
Honestly, I don't know. It's been that way since 1998, and I wasn't involved in the conversations back then. I'm not really sure. The 457 plan used to have a 1 year waiting period also. And a number of years ago, we changed that to 90 days.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, additional questions? I think the 90 days, that's a big jump from 12 months to 90 days, but I certainly will support staff's recommendation on it. Other questions, comments?
I would just comment, thank you for your support, Mr. Chairman and board members. Again, we looked at other, comparable housing finance authorities. We also have talked, we also compete with the private sector, and 1 year I think is quite a bit of time. We're not changing the actual vesting amount. So in other words, if you were to leave or be terminated before the 3 years in which you have vested, the corporation would keep that money, and you wouldn't be able to take it with you. So we're just changing the eligibility, moving it down to be in line with the other plan. So thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you, Trey. I certainly support what we can do to help the staff. Got a great staff, and I appreciate that. I'm just reverting back to my days of working when it was 6 months, but that's all right. All right, any other comments? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Angie. Thank you for what you're doing with finance, too. Hey, David?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Here to request approval for changes to Rule Chapter 67-57, which is the homeownership pool program. So I want to assure you first that we are not constructing swimming pools with this program. We have pools, we set aside pools of funds to incentivize developers to construct new homes by giving down payment assistance to potential home buyers who are at 80% of the area median income or below. So we had this program going strongly before the real estate crash and the foreclosure crisis, and since then it has been only allowed to be used by self-help housing providers. But now that we're coming out of the other end of that crash and there is a need for additional inventory, we've been workshopping this rule and getting it into a form that our development partners on the homeownership side can use. So we've done 2 different workshops in 2018 and had a lot of interaction with all of our development partners. We were looking at construction standards, and we're now at a point where we think the rule is in good shape to go forward, where we'll have good participation from those stakeholders. So for today, I'm asking that the board approve the proposed rule and authorize staff to file the rule for adoption if a notice of change is not required. And if a notice of change is required, to authorize the chairman to determine whether a notice of change makes material, substantive changes to the rule chapter. If the chair determines that it does not, then staff recommends that the board approve such notice of change without the requirement of another board meeting. In the alternative, if the chairman determines that any notice of change does make material, substantive changes to the rule chapter, staff will bring the required changes to the rule back to the board at the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Okay, thank you, David. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Did you get who seconded that? Okay, very good. All right, discussion? Okay, and this has been published, so everyone's had a chance out in the
Yes, sir. There's been a
community to see
couple
it.
different versions that have been published on our website and workshopped.
Okay, thank you. All right, any discussion, any further discussion? Seeing none, do I have a motion? I have a motion to, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. All right. Stefan? Good morning.
So it's my second board meeting and I get to present twice now.
All right, that's good.
So I wanted to provide a legislative update. I'm going to just hit on some of the bills that we have been working with sponsors and proponents on. The first bill is CS for Senate Bill 250 by Senator Flores and House Bill 413 by Representative Lupus. This is a pilot project for state workforce housing tax credits. The legislation would require Florida Housing to implement a state housing tax credit program, $50 million a year for 3 years. The goal is to incentivize the private sector to increase the supply of workforce housing in Florida. Taxpayers owning an interest in the eligible housing development could apply the tax credits, excuse me, against the state's insurance premium tax or insurance retaliatory tax over a 10-year period. The bill passed its first committee reference in the Senate and has not had a hearing in the House. The second bill that we have been working on closely with proponents is Senate Bill 350 by Senator Hudson and House Bill 1155 by Representative Plasencia. This would establish a community workforce housing loan program. The other program I just talked about would be more of a grant, essentially. This would eliminate the CWIP program, which is Community Workforce Housing Innovation Pilot Program. I love all our acronyms. And workforce would be defined as 80% of annual median income. Projects set aside no more than 50% of their units for workforce housing. The legislation proposes 1% loans for a term not to exceed 15 years. And it also requires expedited permitting for affordable housing. And it includes a provision that says local governments may waive impact fees for affordable housing. The House bill has not been heard, and the Senate bill passed its first committee reference. Then we have CS for House Bill 253, which was up in committee this week. It's Representative Gottlieb. It creates an independent living task force within the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. We spoke at length with Representative Gottlieb. He has a personal interest in this issue. He has a niece who has autism, and he would like to find a way to incentivize developers to create units within mixed-use developments, which may be used as low-cost, supportive, and affordable housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. The task force is huge, and Trey would be appointing 22 members of the task force. The last one I wanted to discuss is Senate Bill 1610. This is by Senator Mumford from the Panhandle, and it would create the Hurricane Housing Recovery Program and the Rental Recovery Loan Program. It would put them in statute as permanent programs, and they would be available as needed for storm events, and it provides Florida Housing with rulemaking. And that bill has not had a hearing yet. As it relates to the budget, the House only funded the 2 hurricane recovery programs I just referenced at $74 million for rental recovery, which would mirror sale, and $49 million for hurricane housing recovery, mirroring SHIP. So in the House budget right now, the only counties that would receive funding would be the hurricane-impacted counties in the Panhandle. The Senate's proposal is a little more gracious. They are offering $54 million for the State Housing Trust Fund, $170 million for the Local Government Housing Trust Fund for the SHIP program, $90 million for Hurricane Housing Recovery Program, and $10 for the Rental Recovery Loan Program. There's also around $4 million for services for homeless. And then there is one specific project with proviso for $8 million that would be for the Jacksonville Urban Core Workforce Housing Project. And in the House, that project has funds coming from GR, but it wasn't actually put into their budget proposal. So that is my update. Any questions?
Any questions? If we could you send us, the board members, a copy of that write-up?
Absolutely.
That way we kind of keep on top of what's going on.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I do have
Yes.
just a quick question. Are there any detrimental proposals out there that are moving through the process that you're concerned about?
We're keeping a close eye on some proposals that are not necessarily moving right now.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot is stalled.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of, anything we would have concerns about just doesn't seem to be moving at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Trey. Thank you.
Thanks.
But I know you'll keep an eye on it. Sure, because things can change at the blink of an eye. So, and I would encourage the board members, when you talk to your delegation from your areas, talk about Florida housing and the needs we have. Let's keep that in the forefront so we don't get surprised with last-minute items.
And just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, we're on record as supporting the Senate's budget proposal. That is essentially using all of the money that's dedicated to the Sadowski Trust Funds for housing, and that's a great thing.
Okay, Marissa, you're up.
Good morning, everyone. We are with the multifamily programs, allocations, agenda items, and so we have some really exciting things to present today. Your first item, letter A, it's the RFA 2018-110, housing credit financing for affordable housing developments located in medium counties. On September 6th, Florida Housing issued this RFA, offering just over $14 million of competitive housing credits to applicants proposing developments of affordable multifamily housing located in medium counties. And the deadline for receipt of applications was 3 p.m. Eastern Time, December 4th, 2018. We had some delays with hurricane. We knew that this impacted some of the medium counties. So so there's a bit of a lag there. That's why you see that. We received 191 applications in response to this RFA. There were review committee members assigned and then designated by the executive director. Each member of the review committee independently evaluated and scored their assigned portions of the submitted applications. And at the March 12, 2019 review committee meeting, the individual committee members presented their scores and the committee carried out the funding selection process in accordance with the RFA. The 2018-110 all applications chart that you have in your materials as Exhibit A lists the eligible and ineligible applications in application number order. The eligible I just said ineligible and applications in their number order. The review committee considered the following motions. A motion for the review committee to accept the scoring results that you have in Exhibit A and the applications tentatively selected for funding as set out on Exhibit B, and a motion to recommend that the board adopt the scoring results that you have set out on Exhibit A and, again, tentatively select the funding, applications for funding that you have in Exhibit EB, and those motions passed unanimously. And so as outlined in rule, at the completion of all litigation and approval by the board of any recommended orders that may result from the litigation with regard to this RFA, Florida Housing will offer all applicants within the funding range an invitation to enter credit underwriting. And if there are no intents to protest and no litigation related to this RFA, we will go ahead and invite the recommended applications into credit underwriting. There is an unallocated balance of $156,495 in competitive housing credits remaining, and as provided in the RFA, any remaining funding will be distributed as approved by the board. And so we ask that you approve the recommendations that you adopt the scoring results of those 191 applications and authorize the tentative selection of the 10 applications for funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion? Latasha's moved.
Second.
I have a second. Thank you. All right, further discussion? I just have to comment on there are several developers that seem to have a propensity to submit a bunch of applications. If they were to get all of them, that sure would be a mess, wouldn't it?
Yes. Well, we had, as you see, 191 applications, and we were able to fund 10. So I can tell you, moving forward into the next funding cycle, we'll be workshopping how we look at this RFA, how we set forth our funding preferences and what we can do. And I was going to do this at the end of my presentation, but it would be remiss to not recognize Florida Housing staff, review committee members that score all of these applications. This is significant workload in addition to everything that they do for the corporation. So this is a perfect example of that. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, 191. And that also shows the needs out there. Big time. There's a big need. So, all right. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So item B is the RFA 2018-116 sale financing of affordable multifamily housing developments to be used in conjunction with tax-exempt bond financing and non-competitive housing credits. On October 19, 2018, Florida Housing issued this RFA, offering almost $71 million of sale funding to applicants proposing the development of affordable multifamily housing for elderly and family demographics. The deadline for receipt of applications was November 27, 2018. We received 47 applications in response to this RFA. The review committee members were assigned and designated by the executive director, and each review committee member independently evaluated and scored their portions of the submitted applications. At the March 5th review committee meeting, the individual committee members presented their scores, and the committee carried out the funding selection process in accordance with the RFA. The 2018-116 all application chart that you have in your materials as Exhibit C lists the ineligible and eligible applications, and they are listed in application number order. The review committee considered a motion to accept the scoring results set out in Exhibit C, and the application tentatively selected for funding set out in Exhibit D, as well as a motion to recommend to you that you adopt those scoring results and applications tentatively selected for funding that you have set out on Exhibit D, and those motions passed unanimously. And so according to rule, at the completion of all potential litigation and approval by you of any recommended orders with regard to this RFA, Florida Housing will offer all applicants within the funding range an invitation to enter credit underwriting. If there is no litigation after the challenge period, we will go ahead and offer invitations to credit underwriting to those applications recommended for funding today. And so there is an unallocated balance of $2,684,072 remaining, and as provided in the RFA, any remaining funding will be distributed as approved by the board. And so we are asking you to approve the committee's recommendations that the board adopt those scoring results of the 47 applications and authorize the tentative selection of the 12 applications that you have set out on Exhibit D for funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All right. Any discussion on this item?
I just, on the unallocated balances, what are we planning to do? Is there going to be suggestions from the staff on that?
At this point, no. We do, this RFA has a funding test, so we need the unallocated balance. We only fully fund applications, and so we don't have a recommendation now, but we'll look at as we come into the end of the funding cycle if there's an appropriate place for this. We have future RFAs coming up for persons with special needs that has some sale funding involved, so we'll look at where we're at as we move forward through the end of the RFA cycle and let you know where we're at with the balance. But we don't have any recommendations on this RFA at this time.
Okay, any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Thank you. We have the next one, number C. This is RFA 2019-110, Sale and Housing Credit Financing for the Construction of Workforce Housing for Hurricane Recovery in Monroe County. This will be a familiar RFA to you. On February 5th, 2019, we issued RFA 2019-105, offering $2,776,032 of competitive housing credit funding and $11,260,000 of sale funding to applicants proposing the construction of workforce housing in Monroe County. You authorized to do us after the last board meeting in February because we had some significant funding remaining and some ineligible applications. So the deadline for receipt of these applications was February 20th, 2019. We received the 3 applications in response to this RFA. Review committee members were assigned and designated by the executive director, and each member of the review committee independently evaluated and scored their assigned portions of the submitted applications. At the March 12th review committee meeting, the individual committee members presented their scores, and the committee carried out the funding selection process in accordance with the RFA. The 2019-110 all applications chart that you have in your materials is Exhibit E, lists the eligible and ineligible applications in application number order. The review committee considered a motion to accept the scoring results as set forth in Exhibit E and the applications tentatively selected for funding set out on Exhibit F, and a motion to recommend to you all that you adopt those scoring results set out on Exhibit E and the applications tentatively selected for funding set out on Exhibit F, and those motions passed unanimously. And so, as I've said previously, as indicated in rule, at the completion of any potential litigation and approval by the board of any recommended orders with regard to this RFA, Florida Housing will offer the applicants an invitation to credit underwriting. If there's no litigation, we'll go right ahead and offer those invitations to credit underwriting. There is an unallocated balance of $5 million in workforce sale funding and $925,344 in housing credit funding remaining. And so as provided in the RFA, any remaining funding will be distributed as approved by the board. I will note to you all, there was an ineligible application here. The ineligibility was for a different reason than the last time around for ineligibility. We do not recommend using the leftover balance to fund what we've determined at this time to be an ineligible application. And so if there is any pending litigation, because we have enough funding remaining to fully fund that last remaining application, the other 2 that will be recommended for funding still can go forward. So if that happens to be the case, the 2 that we're recommending here, we would still be able to move forward with. Litigation wouldn't impact those. And so with that, we would ask for your approval of the recommendation here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So move. Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
After we second it.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Yes, sir.
Yes. What is it about the application that makes it ineligible? Just the size,
To my best recollection, and not having the full information in front of me, it was an incorrect set-aside requirement chart. When we talk about our AMI set-aside requirements, this has a workforce component, and we have threshold requirements for the percentage of units that will be workforce units. That's funding from the legislature, you know, that workforce AMI, and the housing credit units. And so it was a deficiency in how they said they would do those set-asides. And so...
is this the intergenerational
No.
project? Oh, it is not, okay.
No. Yep.
What was this project?
This was the workforce funding in Monroe County. So these are all keys, workforce, hurricane recovery developments.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, D is the RFA 2019-106, and this is housing credit and sale financing for homeless housing developments located in medium and large counties. And so on January 9th, 2019, we issued RFA 2019-106, offering $3,620,000 of competitive housing credits and $11,030,000 of sale funding to applicants proposing the development of housing for homeless individuals and families. That also includes a portion of units for persons with special needs, and again, located in medium and large counties. And this is the RFA that we flip each year. We do, last year it was Central Florida region and Tampa Bay region. This year it's North Florida, South Florida regions. And so the deadline for receipt of the applications was February 5th, 2019. Florida Housing received 7 applications in response to this RFA. The review committees were assigned and then designated by the executive director, and they each independently evaluated and scored their assigned portions of the submitted applications. At the March 6, 2019 review committee meeting, the individual committee members presented their scores, and the committee carried out the funding selection process in accordance with the RFA. The 2019-106 all applications chart that you have in your materials as Exhibit G lists the eligible and ineligible applications, and they're listed in application number order. The review committee considered a motion to accept the scoring results set out on Exhibit G and the applications tentatively selected for funding set out in Exhibit H, and then a motion to recommend that you all adopt those scoring results and funding recommendations as well. And those motions passed unanimously. And so again, with this RFA, should there be any litigation, we will come to you afterwards with the recommended order, and then any resulting final order from that. At that point, successful applications will be invited into credit underwriting. If there is no litigation, the successful applications approved here will be invited into credit underwriting. And so we are requesting that you approve the committee's recommendations that and adopt the scoring results of the 4 applications set out on Exhibit G, and authorize the tentative selection of the 2 applications set out on Exhibit H for funding. There's an unallocated balance of $333,200 of sale funding remaining, and there is no unallocated balance of housing credit remaining in this RFA. And so, as I mentioned previously, and other RFAs, in this RFA, any remaining funding will be distributed as approved by the board. And so, thank you. That's our recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Now, let me clarify something. On this one, you awarded 1 in a medium county and 1 in a large county.
Yes.
So the option of doing 2 in a large county is not really an option. That the RFA said we're going to do 1 in a medium, 1 in a large. Is that
Absolutely correct? The funding selection process states very clearly, and this is what we've done in this RFA for the past few years, recognizing that there is homeless need in our medium counties as well, that the first application selected for funding will come from the large county, then the next application will be the highest ranking eligible application in a medium county. And so that's what we've carried out here.
All right, thank you for the clarification. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, we're almost done, but not quite. So this next item, E, this is a little bit different. So I'm going to give a little more explanation. It's titled Request for Approval to Allocate Remaining Competitive Housing Credit Funding. And so this is having you go back in a couple of your Wayback Machine to the last board meeting. At the February 1st board meeting, you all adopted the review committee scoring results and awarded competitive housing credit funding to application received in response to RFA 2018-113. That's our preservation RFA. And that information you have in your exhibits that's attached to this item. There were 3 remaining applications in that RFA that were deemed eligible but were unfunded. And there were also some ineligible applications in that RFA. We had an unallocated balance of $2,058,000 in competitive housing credits after the approval of that recommendation. And during the February board meeting, you all also adopted the scoring results for another RFA that had a significant amount of funding remaining. That was 2018-112. And so that had just over $2.5 million in competitive housing credit funding remaining. And so at that meeting, we recommended to you all that we had some additional potential applications in Monroe County for hurricane recovery. And we said, we think this is a good use of the remaining unallocated funds from these 2 RFAs. We couldn't, pulling some of those together to reissue the RFA that you just approved earlier about Monroe County. And so we just went through that process. But what we also knew at that time was there was still doing that about just over $1.8 million in competitive housing credit funding that wasn't going to go to that RFA. And Mr. Lieberman, who's not here today, asked at the time, hey, there's still some extra remaining eligible applications in this preservation RFA. What about those? And what we recommended to you all was that, let's wait and see what happens through any litigation. And if we know where we stand with that, then we may come back to you with a recommendation to fund those additional remaining eligible applications. And that's where we are now with this agenda item. So there is no pending litigation with RFA 2018-113, and we have enough of at this time, what we believe a buffer of housing credits, depending on still what happens through the rest of the funding cycle, to recommend that you approve the next 2 highest eligible remaining applications to be funded in that RFA. And those are in your materials, but I'll say them. They're 2019-132C and 2019-125C, and that you invite those applications to enter credit underwriting. And so that would be our recommendation to you at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion, questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
One more, right?
That's right. So this is the supplement item, and thank you for your patience with this coming after the fact. We had to do some rearranging of review committee. So this is RFA 2019-105, housing credit financing to provide affordable multifamily rental housing that is part of a local revitalization initiative. On January 9th, Florida Housing issued RFA 2019-105, offering just over $2.8 million of competitive housing credits to applicants for the development of affordable multifamily rental housing that is part of a broader neighborhood or local community revitalization effort. The deadline for receipt of applications was February 6, 2019. We received 15 applications in response to this RFA. The review committee members were assigned and then designated by the executive director, and each member of the review committee independently evaluated and scored their assigned portions of the submitted applications. At the March 15th review committee meeting, the individual committee members presented their scores, and the committee carried out the funding selection process in accordance with the RFA. The 2019-105 all applications chart that you have in your materials as Exhibit A lists the eligible and ineligible applications, and they are listed in their assigned application number order. The review committee considered a motion to accept the scoring results as set forth in your Exhibit A and tentatively select for funding those applications set out on your Exhibit B, and a motion to recommend that you all adopt those scoring results and select those applications in Exhibit B to enter credit underwriting, and those motions passed unanimously. And so, as I said earlier, as outlined in the RFA, at the completion of any litigation and approval by the board for those recommended orders with regard to this RFA, Florida Housing will offer the applicants within the funding range an invitation to enter credit underwriting. If there is no litigation, we will move forward and offer invitations to enter credit underwriting for the selected applicants. And there is an unallocated balance of $505,000 remaining, and as set forth in the RFA, that remaining funding will be distributed as approved by the board. And so our recommendation is to approve for you to approve the recommendations set forth here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, and thank you for the staff. My rough count is about 273 applications that y'all had to go through, so thank you for that. Yes, you. Smile. It's Friday.
It sure is. Good morning.
Morning.
I think the next item on the agenda are 3 professional service selection items, the first of which, item A, is contract renewal for arbitrage rebate services. In April 2014, the board authorized staff to enter into contract negotiations with 2 arbitrage rebate service firms, BLX Group LLC and Hawkins Delafield and Wood LLP. The initial 3-year term for both contracts began back in June 2014. These contracts may be renewed 3 times for an additional 1-year period. At this point, 1 last optional renewal term remains. The staff recommends that you authorize us to renew both of these contracts for the last optional renewal term.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Moved.
A motion, do I have a second? Do I have a second? Okay. So next year, we'll be looking at competitive bidding these, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And that'll be fun.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right.
The second item on this part of the agenda, item B, is a request for competitive solicitation for voice conferencing services. At the end of last year, the state term contract for operator-assisted telephone services with British Telecom expired. As you know, Florida Housing was using these services for workshops and other public meetings so that the public can attend remotely and the operator can assist with moderating discussion so that there's no audio overlap. In January 2019, the Department of Management Services implemented a new agreement with CenturyLink for these services, but based on our needs and level of use, we have found that contract to be potentially cost prohibitive. So we're actively exploring and testing other options for these type of services. The recommendation is that you authorize staff to issue a competitive solicitation to find a firm or firms to provide voice conferencing services in the event that the staff's research shows that an appropriate solution may exceed the $35,000 bid threshold. If it does not exceed that threshold, as you know, we don't have to competitively bid that, but we are anticipating that we might.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second, thank you. All right, any discussion?
Hugh, when does the contract officially end with BT?
I'm not sure. I think that it ended with DMS on December 31st, 2018. And we have, I believe, just, again, under the bid threshold, continued on with them until we find a replacement on a case-by-case basis.
So, okay, case by case. All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Item C. Nancy. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning,
Why is
Board.
everybody frowning up here? Smile.
That's just my age.
You could be
face.
sitting on this side of the desk. I need to frown.
These are old age lines, not frown.
No, they're not. Go ahead.
How about? So we came before you the last 2 years to request that you approve this single source procurement to purchase affordable housing locator services, and we're here again for 2019 services. The Florida Locator, the housing locator, launched in 2006 after we carried out a solicitation for these services. Back then, there were 3 to 4 service providers nationally that we looked at and that were used by many different housing finance agencies like us. But since then, the Emphasis service, which is the company that runs this one, has really become the national standard with, I'd say, 35 to 40 housing finance agencies and also large cities using this, and some of those others have actually aren't even operating anymore because this is the standard. The locator service has been very successful. It's user-friendly for the public to use. Its best feature, we think, that is sort of sets it out as different from other online housing locators is at the call center that consumers who may need help with the site, advocates for consumers, landlords, and Florida Housing itself uses. So with the end of this contract approaching as we do each year, we have been researching prospective vendors that may be qualified and interested in applying to manage the locator services with the same capacity and quality as the current service. We do find that the current services are widely used, as I said, by supportive service agencies, homeless coalitions, legislative staffs. When I say legislative staffs, both congressionally and at the state level, they do get requests from folks who are desperate to find homes. Sometimes those get sent on to us, but a lot of times those staffs will just use our locator service and that call center to get some help to try to find housing. The toll-free call center is staffed by specialists who are trained to work with both the public and landlords with bilingual capacity. Florida Housing has not found any other rental housing locator businesses that provide the call center services. Those services have also been instrumental during disasters, during our most recent, Hurricane Irma and then Hurricane Michael. The call center is able to staff up and really focus and go after extra rentals. In this last storm situation, we even had them go into Georgia and Alabama to look for housing. Of course, there wasn't a lot of it because just above our state line, those communities are fairly rural with limited rental. And we have found in working with our State Division of Emergency Management and others such as HUD in disaster recovery situations, they rely on this tool, as do we. In your board item, we list the services we get from this contract that can't be replicated by any other vendor in the market, according to our research. And so after consideration of the standards that Florida Housing expects for the housing locator service and available vendor options, we believe that Emphasis continues to be the only vendor with the capacity, qualifications, and experience to maintain the level of service that Florida Housing and the state of Florida both rely on. Staff believes that it's in the best interest of Florida Housing to continue with these services and proceed with a new one-year contract. We request authorization to enter into negotiations for a single source contract with Emphasis Computer Solutions Incorporated for this purpose.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions? I've got one, and I apologize for throwing this at you immediately. But anyways, when you said very user-friendly service, that kind of piqued my interest. I don't know any service that's very friendly user. Are there any quality checks that are done to call in and see that we're getting what we're paying for?
No, not that I know of.
Not that you know of.
Yeah.
I would suggest maybe we have somebody just, once in a while, see how really user-friendly it is. And I haven't heard it isn't. I just kind of think that's something we ought to check on.
In the 12 or 13 years that we've run the service, we have never had one complaint. And I will just say, there's nothing else that I have ever worked on where that is true.
I was going to say, I've never heard of that either. So that is
not
good.
To say that folks have always found it user-friendly, but we have heard that from folks.
Well, so, and that is a testimony.
Right.
Probably is, but I just suggest maybe once in a while.
Yes, sir, we will do that.
Not overkill, but just once in a while. Okay, great. We have the motion. No further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we did pull legal item A from the consent agenda, and let's go ahead and address that one now. So, Hugh, you're up.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ficella had some concerns about the language in the memo, the write-up for this. Unfortunately, the way that one of the requests for a waiver is cited, it cites to a Section 1 in the RFA, which includes several provisions. One of those provisions is a 50-year commitment. And I know he wanted to make it very clear that we're not granting any relief from that provision. This was not requested and will not be reflected in the final order that will be issued if you grant this waiver.
Okay. Questions? Mario, is that?
Yeah, I just, for the board, I just wanted a clarification because we are granting a waiver, per the ask here. And it does state that particular section on demographic commitment and the 50-year minimum. And I just wanted to clarify that we are not waiving that requirement.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll request a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda items.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, now we're at public comment. Anyone here? Okay, we have one gentleman. Please state your name and the organization you represent.
I think so. So we have new leadership in the city of Tallahassee, and I feel like this chamber has moved around a couple of times, but I know the podium is now here.
Yeah.
Testing.
Yep.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Sean Wilson with Blue Sky Communities. I'm going to make a comment in my capacity as the president of my company, and then I'll make a comment in my capacity as the chair of the Coalition of Affordable Housing Providers. First, for Blue Sky, we got a call a couple of weeks ago from Florida Housing staff, from Nancy staff, talking about identifying areas that are maybe gentrifying. And that was a really great conversation, and I think that other developers also got that call, and it was really interesting and fantastic that staff is looking into that. And what I encouraged staff to do on that call was to and I will repeat that now, to use to find some statistical basis to identify it, which I made a suggestion on the call, and then to use that to expand the areas that are considered geographic areas of opportunities, or GAOs. And just to remind the board, the GAOs are areas that get the 30% boost on the tax credit program, on the 9% tax credit program, and those are, and that's kind of at the discretion of the allocating agency. So to the extent that you can now use a new tool to expand the areas that get the boost, I think that would be a great thing. And in my capacity as CAP chair, of course we want to congratulate staff also for coming through a very busy application cycle, which started about 9 months ago, and yeah, 270 or more apps is a lot to review, but staff's got a good system down, and as evidenced by the completion of the process today. CAP has reached out to staff and the credit underwriters to have sort of a big powwow to talk about a lot of things, mostly credit underwriting procedures, and I understand that there is a big meeting in the works that's going to have people from CAP and people from the credit underwriters and staff, and that meeting is going to occur at the offices of Florida Housing. And so we are really looking forward to that kind of a big, wide open dialogue, and really appreciate Trey and staff for accommodating that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Dodie Keith Lazowick. I'm here today as chairman of the board of Broward Partnership for the Homeless. And we just wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for the opportunity to select us for your homeless Section 106 application. We really appreciate the work of this board to find opportunities, to find funding for formerly homeless and homeless individuals. It's so important in our community and such well needed. And our entire community and residents of Broward County are just thrilled to death with this selection. And we really appreciate the opportunity you provide for this type of funding for homeless folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none. Any other comments from any board member? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Yeah, but still didn't beat the record.